I'm back to my same old ways. I swear I try to change. You just feel so right when I do wrong. So right along.
So here's, and definitely, God, Mike, we want you in on this one as well. Here's my question. What is a band or a musical artist that you love way more than pretty much everyone else loves them?
Who's going first? I'll go first. I can't say I love him way more than everyone else loves him because he is loved universally. But there is this John Butler solo that he does, and I can't remember what year it is, but it's like a 13-minute guitar solo. Ooh. That's just sick. I mean, he's got these nails that are just like, and he goes through this progression of chords and he builds the entire thing, and then when you think it's done, he's like halfway done. And then he continues and goes through. I mean, it's just silly. So it's one of those songs that I put on when I'm like, okay, I need a minute. Mm. And no matter what my mood is, it always makes me take a breath. So that would be mine.
Nice.
John Denver.
Oh.
So people like John Denver.
Not many people like John Denver.
That's
true.
I adore John Denver.
Okay.
Like, it probably irritates the shit out of my... Like, I try not to play it as much as I want to play it when my husband's around.
That's fair.
Because I recognize that, like, not everyone feels the same way about John Denver that I do.
What's your John Denver deep cut?
What does that mean? Like
the song, I feel like I know, Rocky Mountain High, and like I know the big...
Annie song. So he wrote it to Annie, but the song is about... I probably just have to play it, but it's just a very sweet nature... I'd have to play it for you to really describe it.
But you're glowing. You don't have a camera on you. But if you're listening, Tiffany Morgan...
It makes me happy.
1MC is glowing right now thinking about Annie's song.
It does.
That's fun.
And I'm sure, I would imagine, Malloy, you probably have a similar touchy-feely, sweet musical artist.
So it's funny because I would normally say Frank Sinatra.
That is true.
That's my personal... On any day... If you're even near my car or near my headphone, I can be in the gym.
You can hear driving down my driveway. You can hear when he gets to the top of the driveway, and my driveway is probably 50 yards long.
We were playing some music yesterday in the car, and I asked to play Frank Sinatra, and my son was like, "Dad." Don't sing with everybody in the car because it hurts my ears and I'll feel bad and I don't want it. And I was like, okay, we're good, Bubba. We're good. I will, because everybody loves that man, I would say, and who knows how many people love Slayer, but Slayer is my band. And I don't know that I'm like this metalhead because I like all kinds of music, but I grew up playing a ton of instruments. And I think my favorite one was the drums. And there was something, I've always chased adrenaline and like energy. And when you're wailing on a drum set, your hands and your feet are just trying to keep up with your brain. Mm. And for me, Dave Lombardo, when he was playing the drums for Slayer, as a matter of fact, this is intense. But so as a commander, I got to name my own missions. And me and my chief named every single mission when I was in Afghanistan my first time on a Slayer song.
Out of here. Give us a couple you remember.
It's just kind of silly because it's like there's War Ensemble, right? That's the name of it of a song. Well, yeah, very appropriate. Raining Blood.
Yep.
Also appropriate.
Right. So
the drums on that are crazy.
Yeah. Well, and that's
is there
just
one
the thing
called Beat a Snake to Death?
I can't believe we didn't get that. We didn't record that one. Can you tell
Beat a Snake to Death.
We'll have to
I
do
don't think
that.
I've seen
That'll
it.
have
I
to
can't
be
remember last
bonus
time I've
producer.
seen it.
That'll be producer content.
that one
Look in the
another
links in the bottom of this episode.
That's
You can
pretty funny.
hear Malloy tell the story of Malloy 1, Snake 0.
Right. It's funny though, because while I think about it, my chief, who hopefully will listen to this at some point, he was kind of the one who was like, "Hey, these seem appropriate, right?" And I was like, "Well, let's give it a shot, right?" And we never got denied on the name of a mission, so they all became Slayer songs. Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy.
That's pretty entertaining.
So mine, when I was driving to the studio this morning, I still have a 6-disc CD player in my car.
Of course,
Because I'm a G. And I don't know that I've ever gone like a week without having at least one Everclear album in that rotation. My wife and I love Everclear. We have been to more Everclear shows than makes sense. Wow. We've seen them play state fairs. Like, they're not. Shout out to Everclear. They are not appreciated nearly as much as they should be. And I'm driving up this morning and I'm thinking about episode 6 of Harder Than Healing. And there's a song they do called Normal Like You off of So Much for the Afterglow. And the line he has is, simple people don't seem to understand. You are neurotic and depressed. It doesn't mean that you're sad. And I just think that band, particularly their 2 big albums, gives such an incredible window into mental health and substance abuse, but particularly the way they talk about depression. And I've suffered from depression on and off. It's just so accurate. And so today, episode 6 of Harder Than Healing is called Killing Your Darlings. And it's our depression episode for season 1. And I just wonder what you guys think as clinicians, as folks who've helped lots of people navigate depression. What is your instant reaction to that line? You are neurotic and depressed. It doesn't mean that you're sad.
You want to go?
Nope.
When I work with my veterans, there's a couple of things that I make very clear, and that's that I think most human beings who have had trauma find ways to escape some of their feelings, right? Some of their emotions, some of their thoughts, and that line in particular, to me, describes the difference between I'm really sad and I have depression. Right. And,
Yeah, man.
And I can tell you, I don't have depression. Never suffered from depression, and I have been at very low lows of sadness. Lost my father when I was 21. Lost my mother several years ago to breast cancer. And if you know me at all, you know that those human beings were, on a pedestal I didn't believe was even imaginable. So to lose these people, I was incredibly sad. So much so that I would say that was probably a good solid year that I was in, a phase, some sort of haze, some sort of fog. But that wasn't depression. So that's what that line means to me.
I think the ongoing battle with depression, and the thing that people don't understand about it is that that's baseline. Is the idea of being sad is like you're sad for a period of time, right? Like you have something that happens to you that makes you sad. However, if you suffer from depression, that's always there and it doesn't go away. And so this experience of, well, why don't you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps? Right?
Yeah.
Like that kind of misnomer that it's something that you can just kind of knuckle through. I think it's really difficult for folks who suffer from depression. And in my practice, I don't work with a lot of folks who have depression. Like I'm pretty exclusive to ADHD, transitional stuff, learning disabilities, with adults, young adults, adolescents, teens, et cetera. So the folks that I have worked with who've suffered from depression have been pretty sick. And that would, whether that's in, psychiatric emergency room or whether that's someone who's, been institutionalized because of whatever their diagnostic stuff looks like. But it's an ongoing thing. It's not just a one and done, like I'm having a rough weekend kind of a gig.
Could you guys provide just a little clarification? So that was a great example of, sure, you were going through grief and loss, and that's a sad period. That's a normal thing for a human to experience. How that's different from, say, the different kinds of depression, right? So if we look at it from the clinical perspective, you've got, whether it's a depressive episode versus something like I struggle with, dysthymia. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the differences in that area.
I'll let the clinician go first.
I think when we look at different criteria for depression, whether it's depression or dysthymia, the levels are, it's kind of like a sound wave. So like you can, if you have a sound wave and you have the midline is right in the middle, and midline is just normal, right? Like midline is what everyone would qualify as normal. Dysthymia would be a little bit below that midline. Depression would be a deeper wave. So it's you're dipping further down into your depressive experience, further away from what you would consider baseline or the middle of the road.
Yeah. Well, and then there's, which I like to always highlight, is that there's sometimes depression that's even what we would consider, and I don't know the right wording for it, but it's medically treated. And then also one that is, what is it called? Stubborn to meds, when your depression.
Treatment resistant.
Thank you. And so that treatment resistant for me, so I worked in community mental health for a while before I went and did some other work with veterans. And when that happened, when I was doing community mental health, that was a large part of my population, right?
Yeah.
Those who are taking meds and it's just not working.
Right. Well, and the treatment resistant piece of it is you've had a number of different trials of different medications, and none of those have been effective over a course of time. So it's hard. I mean, the reality of it is that depression is something it's a real thing, and in some ways it's that kind of hidden disability, right? A lot of times folks will talk about ADHD as the hidden disability because you don't see it. It's like, why don't you just focus? Well, why don't you just be happy?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, I don't want to go too far into this right now, but it in some way, shape, or form hidden because those people with depression don't want to leave the house, sometimes don't want to leave the bed, right? We're talking about not having a whole lot of motivation or anything to hold on to that's motivating enough to get even out of bed.
Mm-hmm. And the reality of, like, you still have to function.
Yeah.
And I think with the dysthymia piece, it's one of those pieces where it's like, well, you're not really depressed, right? It's just like you're just kind of depressed. It's like, well, yeah, but it still is very difficult.
And I feel like
to function on these, like, not necessarily every day, but there are definitely days where it's like, whew, but you still go and you have to function in the world. And I think that part of what makes it difficult is people will present like they're okay and mask that experience. It's that piece of asking for help when you need help, or being vulnerable enough to say, like, I'm having a rough go of it right now.
this is the first time I'm hearing that word, dysthymia. Can you guys break that down for me? Because I almost wonder if clinicians have given me a misdiagnosis. I wonder if what you're describing is actually what I have going on. I don't know.
I can't speak to what.
No, sure. But what is dysthymia? Let's start there.
Well, it's more of a, more of a lifetime occurrence of it, right? It's like, for me personally, rather than try to think about a clinical definition, for me personally, it's something that I can look back on my life and I can't find a place in my life where depression hasn't been present.
Oh,
and
interesting.
to Nathaniel's point, it's not that you're always in the deepest of deep depression. but it's almost like your baseline. And you present as things are well and going okay for you, and you find a way to make it out of bed and get out of the house and do what you need to do. But inside, it's a very different experience, and it's across your lifetime versus a depressive episode.
Right. And what I think that the episode piece is important too, right? Like we have situational depression where, you'll have a traumatic event, whether that's, the loss of a loved one, a parent, whatever that looks like. And you can have situational depression that will last as a result of that particular event.
That's interesting.
Or you can have more of a long-term, lifetime depressive diagnosis. And
Okay.
I think the distinction is hard for people sometimes to recognize.
Yeah.
Because the experience is the same.
Yeah, so this brings to, hopefully this is an example that'll register with some people, but so people that know me know that I am constantly moving. I am constantly, you wake up and you're gonna like, I wonder if he's awake, and then I'm buzzing around already, right? And you're getting ready for bed and you're getting ready to hit that sack and you're like, I wonder what he's doing, and I'm still working on a project, right? Like I don't stop. And then all of a sudden one day,
Excuse me.
you're going into the house and you're like, where is this guy? And I'm lying on the bed and I'm watching a movie and you're like, is everything okay? Right. And so for me, it's not going to be depression, right? But I might be sad. And I was thinking about it when my mom passed. I was married at the time, and I remember I had 3 days where I didn't sleep. And then after that, everybody was like, okay, that makes sense. But then after my mom passed, like in my head, I was playing this roll of tape that just played out every memory that I had with my mom. And I was a ball of mush. And I stayed in bed maybe for like 2 days. And anybody that knows me is going to be like, he stayed in bed for 2 days?
Yep.
Like he didn't move for 2 days?
Right.
And people are, that's very different.
So clinically, does that sound to you guys like a depressive episode?
It would need to be longer than
Okay.
that.
Okay. So what's like, I
mean,
think
that's more like
Situational.
that, okay. So that's like, so sad is,
and sad does not even begin to touch on depression, right? And I think that's a piece of what Malloy was talking about initially. Is like there's like sad is you're sad, like
That's the baseline.
right.
Yeah.
Depression is like sad,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
sad exponentially,
right.
right? It's like if sad is 0, then depression is -10.
Like the way that I can describe the periods of time in my life where my depression has affected my day to day is, when you go to the dentist for a cleaning and they clean all the tartar and stuff off the back of your lower teeth, and you walk out, and that first hour your tongue is like, oh snap, like that's what my teeth feel like. I don't know. I got jacked up bottom teeth. Maybe I get more tartar than your average bear. Just freaking work with me here. I would say
I'm tracking.
You're tracking. I would say that depression is like this baseline of film that is covering everything. And sometimes you don't even realize it.
Or you get so used to it being there.
Exactly. You don't even clock like, man, I am not seeking social interaction like normal.
Yeah.
But then that goes for a year. And then suddenly your loved one is like, you're not hanging out with your friends. Have you noticed that? Or it's like, again, people who know me know that I'm always like, I'm going to fight for these people. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to make this thing. And then when I'm in a depressive period of, 6 months or, my most recent one was about a year, my ambition and my belief that I have good things to offer diminishes precipitously.
Well, that's that piece of, not wanting to engage in the things that you would normally want to engage in, right? Like the thing that I want to touch on it with sad is a normal emotional
Shout out to
experience.
Sad.
right? Shout out to sad, shout out to happy, shout out to frustrated, shout out to your normal range. Right.
Angry.
Exactly. Shout out to your normal range of emotions. And sad is one of those, right?
Yeah.
Depression is not normal range of emotion. Right? And I think that that's important to make sure that we recognize that you're supposed to have feelings. I mean, that's what we're doing.
I'm also wondering, you could talk a little bit about, because we talk about treatment resistance or using medication to treat depression. What exactly are we treating? Because a lot of people say, well, it's an imbalance of chemicals in the brain, or is there something else? What other factors are, excuse me, what else is factored into what making depression different from being sad?
Well, I mean, first off, I would say it's a great question because it's going to stump all of us for a second.
Yeah, my brain is like, whoa, hold on, let me process that one.
Well, and two, though,
That's really good.
my mind goes to, so since I'm a clinician, I'm going to say this out loud for everybody here. None of us up here are medical professionals. So none of us are going to speak towards the medical profession. Now, I am very comfortable talking about this part because I am one who likes to believe that the only thing that I can offer my veterans is the other side of the coin, right? Which is not medical, not pharmaceutical. And so for me, there's this idea of chasing the chemistry in our own head. Okay. And so there's only a certain amount of chemicals that get to our brain, right? They have to pass a blood-brain barrier. If I say that too fast, that'll sound terrible. And those chemicals that are in our brain can naturally already make those chemicals, okay, for the most part. So when we start talking about depression, and we can talk about all of those things in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the DSM, and say that there are pieces of the DSM that will break down the history of what you've gone through and say, because of these things, you have depression, or you have anxiety, or you have whatever. So in your brain, there's the likelihood of an organic imbalance, right? And so for me, leaving all of that alone, what I would say is that a lot of my veterans that struggle from any kind of mental health issue is we need to find the right chemistry for dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, some of the opiate receptors. And so what we're talking about here is, for me at least, and I tell this to my veterans all the time, is I need you to feel like you're supported, right? That's kind of like the oxytocin, dopamine receptor stuff.
So what you're describing is triggering them naturally as much as that given brain is possible of output.
100%.
Okay.
So when you think about substance use, you're ingesting something that the brain then no longer needs to make if it gets that signal enough, right? So then the brain's going to say like, okay, at some point I'm done with dopamine, right? Because this human being is ingesting it to a point where the brain is going to recognize, okay, I need to pump the brakes on this or otherwise we're going to get flooded, right? Which is the human being's intention because that feels good, right? So if we do that too much, then we lose our own balance. So when I have veterans that come to me, we're working on those things through connection and camaraderie. Right. We're working on that baseline because that baseline, if you go into isolation, you don't have that baseline of oxytocin and serotonin. Like I said, it's very difficult to sell the long walk in the park with your dog, right? When you have somebody that is ingesting this without having to make any effort towards the park, the dog, and the connection with other human beings.
Right. And I think part of your question around like, what are you treating is you're trying to get to a place where that person feels connected. Because I think a part of what it is that we're talking about with depression and not being able to sell that long walk is how do you get someone to a place where they want to be engaged in a way that's going to provide you with that stimulation, that's going to provide you with that release in your brain. And when we're treating people, we're treating like the whole person, right? Like I think oftentimes, especially speaking to the medical side, which is we definitely are not doing, is there's this idea that you get this pill and it's this panacea and suddenly like you're well. Mm-hmm. However, that's just not the case. And when you're working with someone, when they're working with you and giving you the opportunity to be able to engage with them, what you're doing is you're working with someone to help them get to a place where they feel connected.
Right. And I think that in my own experience, and again, there's such a wide range of people's experiences grappling with depression. I would say for me, I had one instance in my life where I needed is strong. I was able to benefit from medication to kickstart the process of re-engagement, both with my peers and my friends and my loved ones, but also kickstart my faith in myself as an artist and useful person.
Right.
And so the same way that I heard you guys in an earlier episode talk about ADHD meds as not a panacea, but a tool in the toolbox to say, you know what, rather than me struggling through this, let me use this tool to clear this hurdle with the understanding that I'm still going to put in lots of non-pharmaceutical work to help me thrive and with my ADHD.
I was just going to add, that's exactly what I was thinking in my head. Everything we've been talking about on this podcast is a multi-prong approach, right?
Right.
And so many people want the quick fix. Well, just give me a pill and I'll feel better, right? And that's just one tool in a toolbox that you can use. Then there's the exercise, there's the socialization, there's self-education or vitamins or nutrition, like all these different things that factor in, and we can't just rely on, I'm going to take this medication and that's going to solve all my problems, because it's just not the truth.
Well, there's going with the metaphor piece. It's the fourth leg on a chair, right? Like you can function on a 3-legged chair. I mean, it'd be a little wobbly.
It's a lot of work.
Balance.
Right? And balance is going to be a whole lot more there. You're going to feel a whole lot more grounded if you can, twist that thing and get that fourth leg on there. And I mean, there'll be times when you come out and have this vision of an IKEA chair at this point, right? Where you're like screwing on.
Well, I call it
on all the legs.
I call it the
you
teeter
forget
totter. I call it the teeter totter, right? You're on this stable platform, and then all of a sudden issues arise. And once the issue arises, you can just pretend like you just put a ball under that platform, and now you're on the teeter-totter. And to your point, like you can focus on a whole bunch of different things when you're on the teeter-totter, but the bottom line is, unless you're focused on you, right, and your balance, your center, what you need to work on, you're going to be all over the place, right? It's like riding a skateboard that you're not in control of, right? And if you slip on any one side, you're going down, right?
And it's going to hurt.
And it might hurt. It might take a while to get back up, and then there's a lot of work that goes along with that. But I think the intentional piece. So when we're talking about taking medication, I think it's like if you also are focused on you, your balance, your self concept, your everything, those meds they're gonna help you in ways that they wouldn't be able to if you were not focused on your own mental health.
And I think the other piece to pay attention to is that you can get there if you're able to find that community and you're able to kind of begin to find that balance, to begin to supplement those 3 legs that you already have. It's important to make sure that you have those other 3 legs too, though. Like you can't do one without the other. And I think that's the piece to really kind of bring home for me, is like you can't just add one part.
The thing that's really exciting about the guest that we have coming on today is, Steve's not only going to be able to talk about the connection piece, but I'm also really curious to hear how we speak to and grapple with the relationship between holding on to something that is whether it's no longer there to hold on to, or whether it's guilt or shame or frustration or anger. When we've got Steve in the room, one thing that I definitely want to talk about with you guys from a clinical perspective, but also from a just sort of experiential perspective, is the relationship between holding on to something for too long and depression.
All Points North is the official sponsor of the Harder Than Healing podcast. APN offers custom mental health, trauma, and addiction treatment programs at APN Lodge in Colorado. Visit apn.com to learn more.
All right, so we're back, episode 6 of Harder Than Healing, and we got Steve Hueston here, and I'm so excited. We'll intro you in a sec, Steve, but I just want to give the audience a little window into what we were talking about, this whole letting go piece, right? And the healing quality that letting go can have for people. And so the title for this one is Killing Your Darlings, which is I'm the playwright,
Clinician.
Green Beret.
Yeah, I like it.
and in playwriting or novel writing, this idea of killing your darlings is you write your first draft, and a lot of times you have this scene or this line of dialogue or this character that just you love, and a lot of times even it was the idea that inspired you to start writing in the first place. But then when you're editing and you ultimately want to get to the final product, a lot of times you've got to kill your darlings. You've got to take that scene or that line of dialogue or that concept and let it go. So ultimately the full healthy final product can be what you then put out into the world.
Got it.
And
It's like Game of Thrones.
exactly. And so, yeah, it's this idea that it doesn't diminish the beauty or value of that thing, or the significance of that thing. It's just saying, all right, for this project, or for me, the project that is me, for me to move forward in the healthiest, best, strongest way possible, I'm gonna have to let this thing go. And so that's why the podcast, and when we were talking a little bit offline, before we were working out what we were going to be talking about this episode, that sounded like something that you could speak to, both the connection piece and then the letting go piece. So I wonder if so we got Steve Hueston, Dogs of War podcast, Oracle Canine Training. Guy's really good at what he does. And Steve, I wonder if you could just sort of tell our listeners a little bit more about what you do, and then what your thoughts are on this Killing Your Darlings piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So my podcast is Dogs of War. I started it to have other veterans on and share their traumas and how they healed. And it's kind of morphed into canine professionals now because of building my dog training business. So the podcast is kind of a morph between police officers, other first responders, veterans. And my goal is that somebody listening can hear this guy's gone through this crazy traumatic stuff, and he's drinking his life away, he's doing drugs, and a lot of veterans are in that same path. Maybe they can hear this and okay, find hope in it and change somebody's life that way. So that's kind of my whole backstory with the podcast. I was an infantry Marine from 2006 to 2010, served in OIF, did a couple other, we did a MU.
OIF is?
Operation Iraqi Freedom. So I went to Iraq in 2007 to 2008 as an infantry guy. And then, so I worked for the town of Avon, was there for 3-4 years, didn't really plan on leaving. And then the COVID stuff happened and they mandated the vaccine, and I just personally didn't want to take it. And they gave us 11 days notice via email right before the holidays, and I got fired. So I had already been working with dogs as a hobby, doing dog sports like schutz hunt, bite work, tracking, detection. And I was working on the side doing dog training here in the Valley. For me, it's kind of a healing piece. I love dogs. They can't really talk back to you or talk crap to you, and you can really change people's lives. And I was forced to jump in with both feet before I wanted to. I actually should have named my dog training business the Silver Lining Canine Training, because it ended up being that. So my day job and how I put bread on the table is training dogs. I work with pets to police dogs. I travel all over the country and go to seminars and put my bite suit on, get beat up by German Shepherds and Malinois. But here in the county, the valley, I should say, it's mostly pets. So that, in a nutshell, that's kind of what I do and where I'm at.
Very cool. So talk a little bit about the Silver Linings piece. I know you said that you should have named it the Silver Linings.
Well, to me, I was kind of forced into starting my own business, and I was nervous. That was very hard mentally, on mental health wise. Like, how am I going to put money on the table? Can I do this? I have a wife that depends on me, who at the time was a full-time master's student in mental health and was working full-time. And, a lot of sleepless nights and, worry and anxiety that came with it. But now I'm actually starting to make a decent living. People call me every day, new clients. The word's kind of getting out. So it really turned into something good where I was really worried about it. And I'm 35. I'll be 36 next month. And I would say that when this happened, the transition from working in the civilian sector for some entity to having my own business, that's the silver lining in it, and I found my passion in life. It took me 35 years. So people that are listening, if you don't know what you want to do or, you're struggling, it's completely normal, but you got to figure it out at some point, because I'll never go back to punching somebody else's clock ever. And I will not fail. And I'm going to grow this business. And, eventually I want to learn more on the service dog training side of things, because in the veteran community, we've buried just as many brothers outside of the military than we did inside of the military. And I'm so tired of overdoses and suicides. I'm so tired of it. And I think that there's a big wave. We see it, all these, nonprofits that train service dogs and place them with veterans with issues, and it changes their lives. But there's the other side of that, right? That dog's only going to be around for a decade, maybe a little bit more, maybe less. And, personally, I see that being an issue.
And I know that you and I had talked several years ago now, I think, but I went on your podcast, and when we were talking, the clinic that we do is that's our main focus, is trying to figure out how we can stop veterans from killing themselves, right? And so one of the things that I've talked about at length, and I think we probably even talked about on your show, is this idea of the rat park, right? Finding a way for all our veterans to connect and in some way, shape, or form create this community where we are all inclusive, right? We can all hang out with each other and be the support network, because I think it's really difficult to find those people that you can trust to talk to about some of these things. I mean, honestly, that's why we do the podcasts, right? Because this is a beautiful way of talking with that population where they know we're going to give them the information that they already know, and then they can trust us to say, like, okay, so these people do get it, right? They do know the struggle, and then we can continue to talk.
Well, and us walking in the same boots as those dudes,
Absolutely.
If to me, and from what I've seen, if somebody hasn't walked the walk, like, to me, it's hard for me to open up to them or really respect. But not respect. Obviously, I respect.
Is it trust? I
think it's a trust thing.
Yeah.
I think it's a trust thing. And, if somebody hasn't been through the stuff that you've been through, how can they give you, earnest advice? I mean, yeah, you can read it out of a textbook from school, but if you can't connect that to the pieces of, the veteran side of it, then I feel it's hard to connect.
Yeah.
I have a question around that piece of it. What is it about the connection piece that can be more useful, that can be more authentic for folks who don't understand what it's been like to be in a combat zone, or to the folks who aren't connected or who don't have any type of exposure to the military at all? Because I think that's part of what it is that we're trying to bridge, right? Like, my old man was in the military for 21 years. So, like, I've been exposed to military culture. My best friend is jumping out of planes eating snakes. So
I didn't eat it. I might have eaten it. Can't remember.
So how do we bridge that gap in a way where veterans can also begin to feel connected to the larger population. Because as you guys know, the veteran community, I mean, the military community in and of itself is such a small population, right? Like it's like 1% of the population that actually serves. So that's a really isolated community in and of itself. And how do we begin to get to a place where veterans can begin to feel like they can connect to civilians more?
That's a good question. And I think the veteran mindset is part of why there is such a high suicide rate, because you go and you do these extremely hard things and you accomplish these goals of, getting through boot camp, getting through selection, getting through infantry school, going on deployments, earning, these billets of squad leader, team leader, and moving up, and there's respect. Everybody knows where everybody stands. You know where you're supposed to be. You know what you're supposed to be doing. And then you go and you do cool shit, or you do, and you experience some horrible stuff along the way, most likely, and really good stuff. And you have that purpose, and you're doing something bigger than yourself, and you're serving, and then that's all ripped away from you at some point. And then you have to reestablish a new identity, but you don't have people close to you, especially in like this mountain community. I don't know very many other veterans.
Yeah.
And it's a culture thing, because we talk a certain way, we do things a certain way. I would say that if I was a civilian practitioner or doctor or somebody that was on the other end of that, healing or medical side of things, I would spend as much time. I would go hang out, at the VA or veterans meetings and just kind of absorb and understand the way that we work and think. That way you would be able to apply more practical advice in treatment.
Well, and so it's funny because I call this thing the superhero syndrome. And when I talk to Vietnam veterans, they totally get it. But for me, it's this idea, and again, trying to explain this to civilians, right? If we tell you our worst day, as soon as we tell that story, either A, we're going to see your face like turn into this like, holy shit, or we internally are going to be like, that person's never going to want to talk to us again. And so,
or they're going to look at us a certain way, a different way.
100%. Absolutely. And so it becomes that piece for me, at least the superhero syndrome is like saying, you don't see Batman, you don't see Superman, you don't see any of these superheroes going and asking, hey, Bob, can you help me out today? Right. Instead, they're going to go to another superhero, right? They're going to go to another person that understands what it's like to have the weight of the world on your shoulders, right? When you go into combat, you don't go in like, I hope I make it out alive. No, you go in saying like, I'm going to do everything in my utmost ability to make sure that every person here with me to my left and right is coming back, right? And in my impression, that's the weight of the world. So when you get back and you see somebody else and they're also wearing the cape, so to speak, right? Then you're like, okay, so I know I can trust you with the story because you know what it's like to have the weight of the world on your shoulders. And that doesn't always mean veteran too, because a lot of these people, and I'll give a shout out to Julianne over at the Denver Vet Center. She's been doing this work for 30 years, right? And although she recently retired, 30 years worth working with veterans. She wears I'm trying to watch my profanity, but she wears a fucking cape, right? And there's a couple other people that do as well. That's the way I think I would explain it.
Well, just to jut in real quick, being in the military is crazy on so many different levels because, my friends that I went to high school with, ended up going to college and doing all this like, I don't want to call it weak stuff, but, you write your first will when you're 18. And then you're given a gun and you're told that within a year you're going to be overseas and you could possibly have to take somebody's life or have your life taken. And the brotherhood that you build up because these guys are going through this with you, it's hard to talk or open up to somebody that hasn't done that. And that's just the way it is. But
no, I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, I think part of what it is that's unique about this is that's a part of what it is that we're struggling to figure out, right? How do you have that place where civilians can appreciate it more too, right? Because if I don't have the background that I have and the experiences that I've had, then the military community doesn't make any sense to me either. So it's a stretch for sure. And I've never been in the military per se. I mean, like I said, my old man was in the military for 21 years, but I've not served like proper. So,
well, one thing that I can think that where the civilian person trying to help the veteran could be a huge help is understanding the the mindset and what happens to our brains when you're at a heightened alert status for so long, and you guys know, practically, or from being in school, how to work around that and get that person's brain back to a normal level. So I think like on that side, not being a veteran doesn't matter, because if you understand what happens to our brain physically and being on edge for 7 months at a time, and just, the lack of dopamine or whatever it is, that's where I think that, you guys can be a big help. And I think that if you explain that to a veteran that you're treating, like, hey, I've never walked in your shoes, but I understand what your body and your brain probably went through. Yes. And I know some steps that we can take to help that.
Right.
And I think one of the things, when you think about the appeal of dogs, right? You said a dog's not going to give you shit, right? Mm-hmm. A dog's not going to judge you. A dog is such, and full disclosure, I'm a cat person. Mm-hmm. Most judgmental animal.
Oh yeah,
ever. Oh, yeah. But what I think where I totally get the appeal of dogs is how unconditional it is, and I think that one of the things that we see throughout, all human history, human culture, but particularly today, is so often people glean their self-worth from how they judge others. Like, oh, I am such a better person than those people over there. And whether they're doing it consciously or unconsciously, that's where their self-worth is coming from. And so I think, as Nathaniel was saying, one of the goals of this podcast is to say, look, let's move beyond that. Not without, not blindly, but let's see if we can get a little more unconditional acceptance into us at a baseline, because the alternative is a culture in which you've got a handful of subgroups, and then you've got people on the outside of those subgroups. And the people who are on the outside, whether it's a vet who doesn't feel like they can connect with people, so they self-isolate, whether you have someone who's dealing with substance abuse and the shame that comes from that, or somebody who's grappling with trauma, and then all of a sudden they're isolated, and then we're losing people.
Well, and to the dog piece, I think that the dog is probably the closest thing to your battle buddy in the civilian sector, because like my dog, like I know he's got my back, right? He's been trained that way, but he never says, no, daddy, I don't want to go play, or I don't want to be with you. Like, it's unconditional. There's never a sick day, and he's willing to put himself into harm's way to protect me, just like I would for him.
I think one of the things that's really cool, though, especially when we talk about dog training, is like the duality of it, right? Like, it's not just him being connected to you; it's also you being connected to him, right? And I think Sarah actually said this. It's not that you're training the dog; you're training the human, right? Like, how do I foster this relationship so that it's reciprocal in both ways? And that's something that is clearly unique about the relationship that anybody has ever had with a dog that they've loved, right? And it's, in some ways, it's like, how do we train civilians so that they can connect with veterans? And how do we allow a space to be there that opens up this shared experience of suffering, whatever that looks like? I mean, clearly we've not all been to war, right? And on some level, at some point, we have all suffered. Although experientially it's going to be very different. How do we begin to train each other, I guess, so that we can have more acceptance?
I think it's understanding the veteran mindset, or the military mindset, right? Like, the more that you can hear these stories and the way you're being in the military is, the more that a civilian person can understand that. And I went to therapy with this lady named Jill. I don't know if she's around here anymore or not, but she worked at the VA for a decade or more before she started her own practice. And I really, really connected with her. Felt safe. I could open up, and that she was probably the best therapist that I've ever seen. And since she's left, I've done it with another therapist who has no connection about the military whatsoever, and it wasn't the same for me. So I think just doing your time and being around veterans and being into that mindset is enough to eventually to where most veterans would feel comfortable enough to open up and trust you.
I think and this is speaking directly to that piece of the woman that you worked with, who you felt connected with, and the person that you worked with who you didn't feel connected with. One of the things that I think is just a disservice to people who are looking for therapy is this idea that you go and sit down with a therapist and you're supposed to connect with them, right? It's like the analogy that I use is like if you want a Ferrari and you go to the Ferrari dealership and I want a red 4-wheel drive Ferrari that's convertible with heated seats, and I want all the bells and whistles. And they come out with a Volkswagen Bug that's got sports stripe on it and some roll down windows. You're not going to be like, thank you.
It still sounds pretty dope.
Right.
Well, but a
I want.
lot of times the mindset can be both from people who are seeking therapy for the first time and also sort of the loved ones around that person is, well, what do you mean it's not a good fit? It's a car.
Right. But if you are paying for this service, and I mean just straight out from a fiscal point of view, if you are asking for someone to sit down with you and you are going to be telling some of the most intimate stories of your world, you definitely should go shopping. You should find someone who is a good fit for you. And I think that that's really important, is to make sure that people understand you have that as an option. Like you don't need to find,
And you're worth it.
Yeah.
Well, and to be fair to the second provider that I was speaking about, I never met her in person. It was all telehealth.
Right.
And that to me,
That's huge.
I don't believe in that stuff. For me personally, I'm going to hold myself more accountable if I have to get my ass in my car, drive over and sit in front of you and talk to you.
100%.
That's way bigger. So I don't like the whole telehealth thing personally, but
Well, and it's knowing that. I think that's important.
Right. Now, knowing that about yourself, I've been lucky enough, for whatever reason, the way I'm wired, my practitioner who helps me manage my anxiety and my depression, we actually found that the telehealth worked great because I can sit in a spot in my house. I can throw on my headphones. I can lay on my floor. I can sort of hear my family upstairs. And weirdly for me, it's actually more grounding. But this speaks to, you got to find the car that's the car you need to get right.
One of the pieces that I want to talk about too is so in doing this clinic that we're doing, we've had interns come in, and those interns, they shadowed us. They shadowed me for about a year, right, before they were ever able to do anything, not necessarily even clinical, but just to jump in, right? So there's this piece that I don't know if we talk about it enough, but so I have a license in addiction counseling. That didn't mean that I just got out of school and I started working with people with addictions. It meant that I had to go through some extra training, some extra education, and you have to become something called culturally competent, right? And so if you're going to do cultural competent, and I've had a handful of arguments with different people what that really means, but I mean in the veteran space, I mean you could argue that we probably have one of the very maybe not marginalized, but we're underrepresented, underprovided. I mean, we're just underserved veteran population. And a lot of it might just be because every time we go out and try and find that good fit, that Ferrari, we're getting somebody that doesn't understand why we want the Ferrari, right? Because they're not culturally competent.
yeah, I think spending a lot of time, getting your hours and interning around the community that you're going to serve is huge, because like if I was a therapist, right, if I'm working with an NBA guy or an NFL player who's got millions and millions of dollars in the bank, and I don't know what that life looks like, I can't relate at all. If I can't relate to that, how am I going to give him, the best therapy or information that he needs, So I think that piece, following and being around. Like if I would go and hang out with doctor that does work with strictly professional athletes, after a year or so, I'm going to kind of understand the way they move and the way they think.
Yeah,
Same thing with veterans.
Yeah, that's fair.
I wonder if you can share some stories, or if there's one in particular that you can think of where you have known somebody to be suffering from depression, trauma, and they are, whether they're self-medicating or they're self-isolating, and you have seen a dog be that bridge to healing, that bridge that then lets them find their human rat park. It starts with having faith in themselves with that dog.
Yeah, I want to tell you guys the story about the brothers. So my first deployment, I go overseas, come back. Let me back up. Towards the end of the deployment, they started letting guys that were kind of standing out and doing well, that were young, lower ranks, plan and lead missions. You know, bullshit missions, whatever. Like I went out and we bought a goat to have a platoon party, but we had to leave, you know, this vehicle patrol to a certain place, get out, you know, interact with the terp and people and get a goat and come back, stuff like that.
So terp is going to be interpreter.
Interpreter. Sorry, if I do acronyms, just let me know.
Yeah, you're good.
So, anyways, I get back and I'm a Lance Corporal, which is an E3 in the military on the enlisted side. And they made me a squad leader for a little while. And that's kind of normal, or not normal, because a squad leader is a sergeant's position. But what happens usually after each deployment is your sergeants and above go somewhere else and you get new ones. So you get a new command. So we get Sergeant, awesome dude. And his younger brother came to us as a new guy to a different platoon though. So he was a boot. Right, so he's 2 generations down below his brother or whatever. Been to war a couple times, I believe. So, anyways, you know, we go through a MEU, which is a Marine Expeditionary Unit, 4 ships, 3 or 4 ships, a battalion of infantry, a tank battalion, helicopters, Humvees, and mechanized stuff. So you got tanks, artillery, and Amtracs. We get back from that. I wasn't allowed to re-enlist. It was during Obama's downsizing. So they were going to Afghanistan 6-7 months after I got out. And I said, can I extend? And they wouldn't do it. And so I get out and they go to Afghanistan and his little brother both went to the sniper platoon and weapons company through sniper school. They're both snipers, different teams, but in the same platoon. They go to Afghanistan. I get the call one day, got blown up. He stepped on a IED of some sorts, blew both of his legs off. He made it to Bethesda in Maryland. And the survivor's guilt piece for me is hard on that one because he's like, I wanted to go. I wanted to be there and like getting this call and being helpless and you know. He lasted a couple weeks and then he passed away. And his brother was never the same after that. Got into substances, opiates, you know, pills, and then to the top. And he got a dog. He got a service dog through a program. And so this is good this is going to be a good and bad story. For a while, he did great. He kind of had his shit together, you know, a couple years. Dog and him were going everywhere. It was great. I'm like, man, I was proud of, you know, message. I'm proud of you, dude. And then he started messaging me at like 3 a.m, like, hey man, I need bus money. Can you transfer me some money? And I knew because I've been through addiction, and I'm like, man, I'll buy you a bus ticket or I'll buy you food or something. I'm not sending you money, you know? And long story short, he ended up either ODing on purpose or on accident on Christmas Day about a year or 2 ago. So I saw the dog help, but then, you know, he went through this major surgery. He had a scar on his back. They put rods and all this crap in his back. And like, he just could never kick that. And I don't know if it's because he just didn't have the right people around him. But you know, or the VA system let him down. I don't know, but you know, that's the good and the bad.
So one of the things that has been a constant through this season, and one of the things that that Tiffany Morgan, who's also a vet, has been really good about reminding us, is multi-pronged approach. So it sounds like maybe in the case, the dog was able to help him take those first steps out, and then there needed to be more support, more structure, and more steps for him to take.
And let me just say this before you go. I hope I'm not overstepping my boundaries by sharing their stories, but it needs to be heard, and they were, he was a good dude.
Yeah.
He just went through some shit, and, losing his brother who basically raised him, he was a damn good Marine, and, I'm not speaking bad about him, but these stories need to be heard, so hopefully, I didn't overstep, not your guys, but for them or the family. I knew these dudes. I served with them personally. I was very close with them, at a time. And
it's evident, dude. It's evident.
Yeah. And they were good Marines, but this is the side effect of what war and trauma does to veterans.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we have to honor that for sure.
So there's a piece of me that totally recognizes exactly what you're talking about. And I think clinicians, everybody gets excited to solve trauma, right? I mean, everybody, the person it's their trauma and the clinician. But I think the problem with too many of these exciting stories of like, ooh, I want to help, is that we don't start with some sort of series of coping skills, right? Some sort of series of, this is how I'm going to support you. This is how you're going to support yourself. And then we have to get a little bit of buy-in, right? Whatever that buy-in is. Like for you said that you want to be there in person if you're going to be talking to somebody, right? You said that, you're lying on the ground with your headphones and stuff. So long as you know that that's how you're going to support yourself, and the other person knows that that's going to be enough, right? And that's going to help you. There's several of my guys that have been with me for years that'll tell me things like, I started showing up to this bowling thing, or I started showing up to yoga, or I started showing up to whatever, little trick under my sleeve I have. And they're like, I never knew that come into this thing was going to support me so much. And the next thing you know, they're like, hey man, if I didn't have bowling, and I'm like, how would you ever found yourself in a bowling alley? Nope. Never, ever, ever. Mm-hmm. Would you ever found yourself in yoga? Nope. Never, ever, ever. But then the 3-prong or like whole health kind of thing is this idea of, okay, so like we need to compete with that lifestyle first before we start getting to the trauma. Because if you get to the trauma before you have those coping skills, and there's going to be a lot of boxes on the wall of trauma, you open one, and even if you did solve that one, there's going to be one of them in there that might have too much for you to carry.
Well, for me, I feel like my whole demeanor right now is completely flipped after telling that story.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I agree. And when I put the bite suit on and I'm looking at this dog who has intent to really harm me, and I we're fighting and biting, and the adrenaline rush from that, and like the physical aspect of that, man, it like takes you right back, for me anyways, to that lifestyle. And that's why I do it. I like that, but yeah. I agree.
Talk to me about the demeanor piece. Like when you say my demeanor has changed since I told that story.
Part of it's worrying about if I overstepped any bound, if the family was to hear this and be upset with me.
We can beep out the names, bro. Don't worry about it. Okay. We're going into post. We got Malibu Keith doing all the editing. We were going to make sure you're.
That's where I was thinking. I should have just not mentioned names.
No. Listen, man. We're only 6 episodes in, and I already have a list of things where I'm like, Keith, we're beeping that out, right?
But I would, if you can finish what you were going to say, because that's huge, right? Because I know that when I start talking about my guys, and sometimes, I'm a clinician, so I'm used to leaving names out of stories. I'm used to holding secrets, right? So that's easy for me. But when you tell these stories, I still would like for you to tell us what you're going through, because that demeanor change, that's huge. Yesterday, or I should say whatever the episode, you could bleep that one out too, Keith. That episode, that fucking shit was hard. That was deep. It was heavy. So if you could just speak a little bit more about what you're going through.
I guess because I've never just dealt with it, and, I spoke with his mom, his poor mom, like, and it's just something I haven't dealt with. And like inside right now, I feel like before I shared that, I was, more happy, or we were more like, not like joking, but it was easy. It was just easier. Now I feel completely, kind of like it's in like a pit. I got a pit in here now, and and that just speaks to like I've just buried stuff, and it's coming to the surface. With people I've just met, and it's a heavy story. And,
for sure.
But yeah.
Well, and I think that there's an authenticity to it, right? It's you being able to be in a space where you're like, this is where this is going, and still being able to own that story and honor that stuff, and knowing that that has an impact on you as well, right? And holding that is hard. I mean, it just is. And whether that's whatever story it is for whatever person, when you have those moments of like, oh, this is really hard, for you to be able to catch that is huge.
Oh, I appreciate it.
I mean, one of the things that I was talking about this with Nathaniel the other day, and these guys keep on saying like,
Hold that till the end.
don't say it.
Hold till the end.
Fine. I'll hold it till the end.
Here's what I'm thinking, man. It's been such a blessing having you here, right? And I know I speak for everybody in this room that we're grateful. You have helped people, and it takes a special kind of fucking strength and bravery to sit in that chair and speak truth like you did, man. And you're such a sincere person. And I think that, you know, it's obviously why your podcast does well. It's obviously why your business is blowing up. And, you know, again, I have no connection to service, right? At least in my immediate generations. I didn't serve, you know, my folks didn't serve. You'd have to go back to the Second World War to get to my service, right? Oh, wow. I feel honored that you were able to trust me. I mean, I'm a civilian as against, bro. I'm a theater teacher, right? I mean, you were talking about like, and so
who loves cats,
right? Who loves cats? And the upshot is that I know, because I go to conferences all over the country and I speak with teenagers who are coming out of neighborhoods that feel like war zones to them. I speak with students whose internal battles with depression or anxiety or them living their life on the autism spectrum, they feel this level of people don't get it. And your willingness to model opening up, man, you're going to help not just vets, but I'm telling you, there's a 16-year-old who's sitting there in their bed right now being like, man, that guy's fucking brave, dude. And so just for them, thank you.
I got this piece, and I don't know if this is where you were, what you were feeling or not, but I have done that same thing when talking to people and felt like I overstepped my boundary. And for me, it's coming from like this sacred place, right? Because this sacred place is this place of I love these people, right? And I do want to tell that story, but that sacred place is it my story to tell? I really want to tell that story. Can I tell the story? I don't want to offend anybody, but please let me tell the story.
Well, and the other side of it, you know, if it was me or, you know, something that happened to me, I would want my memory to go on and help other people. Yeah, you know, this person OD'd, and, you know, there's a shame piece to that for some people, but I don't think that their memory should just, you know, or their story shouldn't be told. You know, if I didn't know these people and personally be with them and go through this, and, you know, it probably wouldn't be my place. But I want other people to hear it and, you know, get help from it. So,
yeah.
I think the other piece about it is it's your story too. You know, I mean, there's definitely the honor of like making sure that and clearly, right, cognizant of what it is that you're sharing. And it's your story too.
And I'm an honest guy. I'm straightforward. Like, I say things and like sometimes I'm like, fuck, I shouldn't have said that.
Oh, it happens to me all the time.
You know, so like that's why I just came out with it, and then I was like, oh, okay, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's the truth, and you know, but like you said, the sacred place, like these dudes are honorable guys, man. Now I definitely serve with some shitbags, and I would definitely name them and shit all over them, right? Guys that deserve it. But like when you hold these dudes like near and dear, and I guess the hard part for me was that I was sitting at home in my recliner doing some bullshit job, drinking myself to sleep, and I couldn't be there, you know, and that was very hard. That was as hard as, you know, being there on some level.
So for me, there's I have a similar story, and for me, my story was I went to this person to tell them that their husband has been killed in action. And when I I walked up to her, and I'm already like fighting every ounce of tear that I got. I mean, I'm about to become dehydrated, right? And so I walk up to this woman and I said, you know what? I'm sorry. And it was like before I even got it out of my mouth, she was just like, nope, no, you don't have permission to tell me you're sorry. He was there because he loved you guys. He was there because he wanted to serve with you guys. He died doing exactly what he wanted to do. So you cannot give me this sorry thing. You try and give me that bullshit and you can leave. But if you want to be here and be authentic, then let's live through him. Let's have those memories. So
Yeah, I agree. It's a tough road. Tough road.
I wouldn't give it away for anything though.
No, I wouldn't change it. I agree.
And like you said, man, you're bankrolling your own podcast, right? You're doing it. Why? What inspires you to do? I mean, you're on episode. You're going to have episode in the 80s dropping soon. What inspires you to do your podcast?
I think that the veteran piece that needs to be told, what people went through, and how they healed from that. And like I said earlier, like I'm not a wealthy guy yet. One day I will be. And I can't really donate or do things personally, but I'm good at talking to people, and I like hearing war stories just as much as the next guy. You know what I mean? So, but the healing piece, because like I said, man, I'm tired of. I could probably list off 10 to 12 people that have killed themselves or OD'd since we got out, and I'm just tired of it.
How long have you been out?
So I got out in 2010, so 13 years.
Yeah.
It's, but it's still right there.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure for you it is as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But yeah, so I do the podcast because I enjoy it, and I've had some pretty crazy dudes on. I had the Navy SEAL handler of Cairo, which is my dog's. I named my dog after his. That was on the Osama bin Laden raid. Dan Cirillo was the first Eddie Gallagher. Basically, they tried to pin him for murder overseas, and he beat it. But like it, to me, talking about it is a way toward a path towards healing.
Absolutely.
Because we bury it down, like we compartmentalize it. My wife's like, I don't understand how you do what you do, and I'm like, well, you get really good at just stuffing shit away because the mission or the job doesn't change, and we got to keep going. If I want to sit here and wallow about it, then that could get this guy hurt or this guy hurt. So you just stuff it down.
But it sounds like you're done doing that.
Yeah. I'm not perfect or healed, but my wife is a mental health professional, and she's actually got a couple books that she wants me to read, and a lot of it too for me is the childhood piece. I had a pretty shitty childhood, not shitty, but like definitely some shit that you shouldn't have to go through. And my wife, this book I'm about to start today, it's called It Didn't Start With You. And I'm sure most veterans, like all the dudes that were in the infantry that I was around, came from some pretty hard places and hard lives. So there's a compounding factor that happens when you have generational trauma and childhood trauma, and then you go to the military, and there's a loss or grief. And the culture in the military when I was in is like you didn't talk about anything like that, anything, because like if you said, hey, I got something going on. Like, you're going to be a shitbag. They're going to put you in some platoon with guys that have tried to kill themselves or beat their wives, and they're getting kicked out of the military.
Yep.
And when I got out, it was like a semi-week-long death by PowerPoint experience called Steps and Taps, where they teach you how to write a resume, don't beat your wife, grilling and boating safety, and then see ya.
Yeah.
I got out. I didn't have a plan. But yeah, I think the veteran thing, I think a lot of us have had childhood and generational trauma stuff, which compounds.
Yeah. Well, and I like to think about it, and I don't know if I'll say this right, but I don't think all veterans, or I shouldn't say veterans, I don't think all civilians that go into the military are going in for ideals, right? We're not going in there because like, hey, thump my chest, I'm proud of my country kind of thing, as much as we are, but sometimes we're running away from things as much as we're running to things. Right. And I don't think, I've heard this comment so many times that it kind of bugs me is this, like, well, you went to the military, so clearly you wanted to go out there and, you know, kill people and fight people and fuck people up. And it was funny because, I mean, my son at the time was in 3rd grade, maybe, and this kid comes up to him and was like, oh, your dad's in Special Forces. I bet you he can kill people. And it was funny because if you guys know anything about my son knows the Army motto, which is, this is we shall defend. And he was like, no, my dad defends people. Right. And I was just like, go, son. But at the same time, I was thinking, like, why won't more people see it that way? Right. But instead, they see us as these people. We come out because we're crazy, because we just want to go in there and we want to beat people up and hurt people and stuff like that. That's just not the way it is. Right. And so when you start talking about your podcast, I'm thinking to myself, like, if you can glean anything from a veteran, the one thing you can glean from us is we strive for meaning and purpose. Right. And for you to do your podcast, for me doing this podcast and my work with other veterans, it's like once you get to a place where you're surrounded by people that are going to live and die by you, with you, and in conflict with you, it's really kind of hard to find that meaning and purpose again, unless you do things like you and I will do. It is sacred, right? It's meaning and purpose. And it's beautiful as far as I'm fucking concerned.
And I think the other piece is the connection. The meaning, purpose, and the connection. When you talk about being with your group,
yeah,
that's the piece that I think when you talk about getting discharged, and you said death by PowerPoint, right? Like once you're discharged, it's like you just snatched away all that connection.
Well, and now though, I had an Army Ranger on recently who's a dog handler, been through some shit, and like they send him to brain clinics and they send you to this and that and this, and like the level of support now compared to when I was in is crazy. It's way different. And you're right. Like I was tighter with those dudes than anything ever since. And I don't know about you, but I don't have a best friend here, you know, like it's my wife and me. And I wish I had a dude that like was on the same level and understanding as me that I could, you know, have a relationship like that with, but I've found it hard to build those relationships since I got out. 'Cause you're with these dudes, you're banging their cousins and you're going through misery and trauma and freezing rain, and you know you go overseas, like, you know, these dudes would give their life to protect you. Like it's hard to find that when you get out, and then one day it's just ripped away. And it's kind of like when you graduate high school, everybody just goes phew. And like I've seen 2 dudes max, maybe 3 since I've been out, you know. Social media helps, but yeah, it's hard. It's different. And then especially when you come somewhere like this in the mountains here, it's such a transient community. It's hard to get close to people because after 2 years, they move back home. They can't afford it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a huge piece for a lot of veterans. Me in particular, when I came out, I struggled with that quite a bit. And I didn't even know I was struggling with it, right? Like I just go to work, right? That's what I do. I just go to work. And then my wife at the time was just like, you should probably connect with some more people. And it's just like, nah. I'm fine. I mean, I'm an introverted introvert, right? Like I don't really need people is what I say, but internally I need people, right? I need to be able to see their facial expressions, recognize I'm not going crazy, get that feedback, those kinds of things. And then, oh, by the way, occasionally, you know, honestly, I need a fucking hug from one of these guys and be like, yeah, that's my brother, right? And I feel connected. Yeah, I mean, at this point, my rat park is my meaning and purpose and trying to create that. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think that's one of the biggest things that lead to the suicide and the drug and the substance use in the 100%. Community, because you're lacking that, like that purpose and that group of dudes. And, you know, I can't speak for everybody, but for me, that was very hard. It's still hard. I still deal with it, you know? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I do these group canine events where I call them Canines and Brews, or Canines and Cocktails. And a couple of my buddies are Green Berets. They own Vale Brewing Company.
Oh, very cool.
And we do them there. And then we do them at Bob's Place and 10th Mountain Distilling, which is other veteran-owned business. And then Eagle River Brewing, which just opened up. They're Marines. So I told the guys at VBC, I said, I got to get away from you Army fuckers and go down over here, be around some Marines.
That's funny. That's what the Army fuckers say about the Marines.
Yeah,
it is. But at the same time, you know, we're allowed to say that to each other.
Yeah.
If I heard a civilian say that to one of us, we'd both be like, what'd you say?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I'm going to sit here with my mouth shut. Well, listen, this has been, I mean, obviously we could keep talking shop. We're going to have to get you back, obviously.
absolutely.
This has been such a gift. What we're going to do is we're going to go into a quick break. We're going to check in with one MC. We're going to do our wrap up. This has been incredible having you here, Steve. So just once again, we got to plug Steve Hueston, Dogs of War podcast. Listen, it's great content, meaningful content, and Oracle Canine Training. If you're up here in the mountains, you know who to go see. And we're going to come back in just a minute. And just Steve, we all want to say thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Cool. Right on.
Plus by APN is an official sponsor of the Harder Than Healing podcast. Plus by APN treats the root causes of mental health issues with neurotechnology like deep TMS, ketamine-assisted therapy, and stellate ganglion blocks, so you can get relief from symptoms and find long-term healing. Schedule a free consultation and find your treatment match at plusapn.com. That's PLUSAPN.com.
All right, so something we briefly touched on in our episode with Craig, our Vietnam veteran, and I think it directly relates to what we were talking about today with Stephen, is this idea of how do we get our civilian counterparts to engage with us? How do we engage more with them? And so many civilians don't know what to do. A lot of them want to do something, they don't know what to do. And so they go to the thank you for your service. And for them, that's all they know to do. And they think they're coming from a place of respect. But for the veteran, we're like, you don't have any idea what I did. What are you even thanking me for? And it comes across as quite the opposite, as disrespectful, as opposed to integrating yourself into that community. And that's something I talk a lot about when I do a training on military culture is, you know, how can I learn more? Well, it's not just taking an online class or one of my trainings. It's being part of the community. So finding those veteran nonprofit organizations in the community, and there's a lot of them that have a focus on incorporating civilians into the mix. So places like Team Rubicon, The Mission Continues.
Can we put those in the show notes?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
And so I highly encourage civilians to do that. Get involved. Don't just go to a training and say, I'm good to go. I've got that certificate. I'll put it in my file and now I can work with veterans, because it's not going to work. It's not going to work that way. You got to get to know us and you got to be part of our community, because that community is the important piece of the puzzle. And Malibu Keith gave me a good point, which is it's kind of, from the civilian perspective, it would be the idea of going from living in a big city where there's so many people, but you're very, very alone, to living in like a small town or a farm where it's a much smaller community, but everybody knows each other and everybody's looking out for everybody else's best interests. And you always know, you always know you have somebody to be there for you.
So I had a legislator and he said, Donald, I want to hear a little bit about some kind of war story, right? Because I just want to prep myself for working with a veteran. And this is how I phrased it to him. And I don't know if this is going to help our viewers or not, but I said, so what you're telling me, right? Because I'm working with this person. I've known this person for about a year and a half. What you're telling me is that you want to hear my most intimate, embarrassing, sad, depressing. I mean, I can't throw enough intense words out there.
Hardcore story.
You want to hear me become vulnerable to you. What you're asking me for.
So that you feel better.
Right. And that's the part of it.
Right.
Because when you say thank you for your service, and I could tell my son's thank you for your service story here if we need to, but when you're saying thank you for your service, that's not for me, right? That's for the person who is asking that. Typically, the only way I can respond is it was my honor. And I say that because it was my honor, distinctly my honor. Anybody who knows me is going to know it was my honor to serve, has nothing to do with the person who is saying thank you for your service. Although I get it, and that's going to make you feel good, and that's fine, because I say it sometimes to veterans too. There's still this piece of it that's, if you want to really get to know a veteran, recognize that you're going to have to be beyond authentic as well, because we have a really good bullshit meter. And if you come to us and you want to get to know us, we'll be authentic as long as you are authentic.
And nowadays, post 9/11, there's so many opportunities to connect with the veteran community. Dogs of War podcast, books, organizations. I mean, there's so many ways to connect outside of just going to a training. Trainings are great, but they're not experiential.
Yeah, 100%.
Training sounds like a good idea. One of the producer notes that we've had that was on the board, I think it was the first one that went out there was if, so Malloy was telling the story of these cats down in South America who were super proficient at their jobs, like bouncing out of helicopters, going through a 3x3 gap in the trees, like the canopy of the forest, or whatever other version of hardcore story that we've had so far. So this idea of if you getting blown up isn't hardcore, then what is a thing. And we were talking about it yesterday. I'd been thinking about it since I saw the producer note, and so Malloy and I had a conversation about that, and I stopped him from telling it earlier because I wanted to use that in this last segment as food for fodder.
Yeah, well, and I can't wait to get your impression on it too, Steve, because this for me, this was the hardcore part. So when I was in Iraq, I had a section of infantry, but I also had a section of tankers. So when I got to Iraq, I was a platoon leader, but I was attached to, or I should say my primary job was as a tank commander. Now, I'm a light infantry guy. I know nothing about tanks. So because I'm a light infantry guy, I go to my battalion commander and say, hey, here's my threat assessment. And I say, hey, I can't get on the ground, right? So here it is, write it out. I need more people so that I can get on the ground. A tank platoon has about 16 people, and that's not enough to get on the ground, period, the end. So I get a section of infantry. So now my task org is one section of infantry, one section of tankers, which, by the way, was absolutely fantastic. All my tankers were able to be in trucks, be on their guns. They know mechanized very well. So that was fantastic. Then I get on the ground, and now my section of infantry guys, these guys are spot on the ground. We go and get into a couple of different skirmishes, okay? Nothing huge, but a couple of times these firefight, couple IEDs, this kind of stuff. And when we get back, I start to see the posture of some of my men change. And when I start to see their posture change, I talk to one of my team sergeants, and I said, and when I say one of my team sergeants, remember, when I get a section of infantry, that means I get a new team sergeant, right? So this section kept on swapping out. And I get this new squad of guys, and we have this, firefight. And there was a couple guys in particular, and one guy fell, and it was a medic, so a couple of the pieces of his med kit fell out, and he had to be accountable for those, right? So we had to say, like, okay, well, this is what happened, right? And we put that into the report, right? He fell, these narcotics fell out, right? And I can attest to that as a commander. That was easy. But some of their postures were different. And I said, so I want to have a sit down in a room to debrief this. And I couldn't help but say it. So I said it, and my team sergeant looked like at me I was crazy. And I said, this is going to be an emotional debrief. And he was like, sir, what the fuck are you going to do? I'm going to ask him how it felt. And he gave me this look of like, we're not doing that. We're just not going to do that. And I was like, no, we're going to do it. So we got the whole entire gang in. We're all in this huge sea hut. And that's it. I opened up the question. I was just like, hey, so you guys, we did this, we did this, we did this. Everybody knows that. How did it make you feel? And it was funny because it was crickets, right? And everybody's kind of looking at each other and whatever else my team sergeant says, his head kind of hanging. And I was like, come on, guys. Like, how did it feel? I mean, it's not a hard question. We're going to be here until you guys answer the question. We wait. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, this isn't going to work. And I tapped my team sergeant. I was like, hey, look, here's the deal. These guys love you. They respect you. You open it up. And he was like, what do you want me to say? And I was like, I want you to tell him how you felt. Period, the end. So he says, I got you. Stands up. He looks at one of the guys and he says, you. He didn't say you, he said his name, but for this story, hey, you, I was scared shitless that when you would walk around that corner, there was going to bullet that was going to fly through your head, and all I was going to see was blood come out the back. In my head, I could see this spray of blood and you would fall. I was petrified. And it took me until you finally got around the corner and then guys started following you, and he was just like, I could feel myself breathe again. And then he sat down. And now in my eyes, I was just like, oh my God, like that's fucking heavy. And then the next guy said the same thing. Dude, when you rounded that corner, it was intense. And then more people started talking like, dude, I'm sick and tired of what you do. When you're on patrol, you never look at your area. You're supposed to be looking at your responsibility, and it's this part. And he's like, I always look at that spot. He's like, no, you don't. You don't take, your practice. You don't take your rehearsals seriously. So if you would take those rehearsals seriously, you would have that corner. He's like, look, man, I'm sorry. I'll take them seriously. He's like, man, I can't begin to tell you it was so fucked up and I was so scared. And these guys are like, now they're talking about how they felt, right? They're talking about what was going on with them in that specific instance. When we got back from this is the reason why I had this breakdown of emotions, was because we're in trucks, okay? I'm in the second position, right? I am the number 1 truck as command truck, but I am in the number 2 position. My section sergeant's in the front and my platoon sergeant's behind me. There's 4 trucks lined up. If you're in a truck and you're not me or my team sergeant, you can't hear anybody else in the other trucks. We come back from mission and there's 2 guys that get out right when we stop to go and blow our rounds into a berm to clear our weapons. And 2 guys get out, one from the 2 truck and one from the 4 truck. And when they get out, they don't hesitate. They round the corner of the trucks and they run to each other and start hugging it out.
You got it.
That's hardcore.
So the reality of it is that hardcore is more than just getting blown up. It's being vulnerable, being authentic, and a piece of what it is that we are working towards is supporting each other and being a community across the board. Civilians, veterans, everybody. And as we were having that conversation, as I was reading the production notes and as I was thinking about what it is that we've done so far on this podcast, there's a natural tendency to think that it's hardcore for you to jump out of a plane, helicopter, zip through a 3x3 canopy, and then like you're badass. That's true. And that's badass.
So the piece of it for me that became, so that was Iraq, right? And then we go to Afghanistan after that. And I wholeheartedly felt like, because after that, some of these guys were talking about like, they had these sections of infantry had to switch out, right? And so that section would switch out and go back to their original platoon. And I started to have these conversations that were going on. They're like, I can't wait to get back to that platoon. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's not me. And you guys know this, like you guys know this about me. It's never the clinician. It's never it's never one specific person. It's literally the leadership that somebody is given the guidance to. You get a feel, right? You get a feel and you get to communicate. Right. You get to be your person out there. And I want you to experience that. So when I went to Afghanistan, I got my team on board with this early. And when I got to my team, we were ranked the last in the battalion, which was really kind of embarrassing, but whatever, and that was fine. But when we went to PMT, and these guys bought into this idea really early. Pre-mission training. So we're in pre-mission training, actually in New Mexico. I was at the time we were in Florida, getting ready to go to Afghanistan, and we took this long trip to New Mexico. And so we're there, and we had these rehearsals, but we didn't focus 100% of our time on rehearsals. We also focused that time on let's get together as a team, right? Let's be family, right? Because that's what we are. Mm-hmm. And so as we grew into this like really and I'll use the word intimate because we're able to share stories with each other that are like stories of family. And then we go into pre-mission training and we smoke it. I mean, we absolutely smoked it. We had the best times, we had the best targets, we had the best iteration. And then, the group commander came up to me and said, so why shouldn't you guys go? Like, why aren't you guys going? And I was like, because somebody made a huge mistake. This is absolutely the best team that you will ever have in this battalion. Phone call to phone call to phone call. Hey, how did this team do in PMT? They ranked number 1. The group commander then invited us to go to Afghanistan. Yeah. And that was, for me, that's a testament not necessarily to, if anybody knows special operations people or guys or whatever else, I mean, and I can barely even consider myself in the same boat as these men. I mean, these people are specimens. They are very highly tuned, trained people. They are good at what they do. The only difference was my team was able to get connected, right? And that was the piece. That's the hardcore piece.
That is the hardcore piece. And as we wrap up, episode 6, Killing Your Darlings piece, it's an episode on depression. I don't talk very loud, apparently. And that lack of community, that loss of community, that loss of connection is oftentimes can be the precursor to that. And in the service of healing, we need to make sure that we appreciate the reality that having a community and forming those bonds can help in those moments.
I think that when I think about how I came into this episode and now how I'm going out of it, for those who don't know, I set up sort of a beat sheet as the playwright, right? I try to put some structure on what our episodes are going to look like. And I was really proud of this whole Killing Your Darlings when this is going to be the episode about holding on and letting go. And I got the note from Keith that he could see on my face, and now I can't wait to go back and watch this. He could see on my face the moment where I let that whole plan go. And I was just like, man, Steve Hueston is just like pearl after pearl after pearl, right? And this whole thing is going this very organic and real direction. And sometimes that's what healing looks like, is to just allow the moment to be sacred and be what it is, and trust it and have faith in the other people in the room. So I want to express my gratitude once again, right, to Steve Hueston, Dogs of War podcast, Oracle Canine Training. And fellas, any last thought? One MC, any last thought before we get out of here?
Yeah, there's been a lot of adapt and overcome happening in here.
Nice.
You said that you had this on letting go, and I was thinking like that's exactly what you did to let this all work the way that it needed to go. So kudos. You let go, and I think it was pretty special.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Steve.
All right,
Steve.
Hey, listen, this has been episode 6 of Harder Than Healing. We can't wait to to get this one in the can and get it out to you ASAP. And we'll see you again real soon. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And as we always say, you're worth the healing.
Hi, my name is Watika Ling, and I am the CEO of Warrior Now. And I want to thank you for listening to Harder Than Healing, produced in partnership with All Points North and Warrior Now. This podcast is recorded on the APN campus in Edwards, Colorado. Warrior Now is a nonprofit organization that provides veterans a whole health approach through peer-to-peer services. For more information, you can contact us at info@warriornow.org or pod@harderthanhealing.com. You can also find us on all social media platforms at Warrior Now. Like, share, or subscribe for new episodes. Thank you.